I'm honored to call member of Knesset Zehava Galon, the head of Meretz since 2012, member of Knesset since 1999, member of many committees in the Knesset today, member of the Foreign and Security Committee of the Knesset, member of the Finance Committee, MK Galon. Hello and good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. It was my intention to speak here. When I got the invitation to speak, I was going to speak about 10 years of the Prime Minister in office, and especially his failure in promoting political peace process, but I cannot refrain from addressing the various corruption affairs. Actually, the Prime Minister has broken the record set by Ben-Gurion in serving as Prime Minister. He's been in office for 8 years running. Time can be a gift, but it can also expose exactly who you are and what you can do. And there is no sign that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to give up his seat, even if he is indicted. And this should be said very clearly. As far as the investigation goes, that's how far the interests of the State of Israel are being abandoned. What stands behind a Prime Minister who is willing to sacrifice the interests of Israel in order to wriggle out of police investigations? What is it going to leave behind? What is the legacy? A corrupt political system which was built in order to serve only one person, and that's Benjamin Netanyahu, who is trying to convince us that there is a conspiracy plotted against him to blacken his name. He says there's a well-orchestrated media campaign against me. So what do we have? We have members of his own party who applaud every new affair which is being exposed. Some of these are criminal cases, but for sure they all reflect very rotten political norms and public norms. There are members of Knesset who have stopped seeing themselves as public representatives and became bodyguards to the Prime Minister. He has made some of them into a farce, as if their entire role is to protect him in the media, the Knesset, everywhere. But what I find most frustrating, ladies and gentlemen, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has even generated an opposition in his own image. He is charged with so many issues, and my fellow members of the opposition, Herzog and Lapid, are mainly concerned by the fact that the Prime Minister is spending too much time in investigation rooms. How can you run a country like that? Yes, you can't. It's true that you can't. But how can you run an opposition like this, striving to be an alternative to the government, when you exercise the silence of the lambs or of the cowardly? We are witnessing a deep process of corruption and a public that doesn't really believe anymore that this system is supposed to be there for them, work for them. I believe that Israel is greater than Netanyahu and that it's going to survive Netanyahu, but Israel desperately needs honest people, people who are not willing to look away, people who are not willing to shut up and decide and wait until Netanyahu decides to get off the throne by himself. That's not going to happen. He's not that sort of person. And all those skeletons in the closet are just becoming too many for him to let go by himself. And therefore, I'm saying this here loud and clear and in an unequivocal fashion. I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu has to go home right now. But ladies and gentlemen, until this happens, however, I would like to still review the last 8 years under Netanyahu, where he where he revealed himself as a kind of political mutation. Or a political master, rather, in a political mutation. There is not a single knot that he hasn't cut. There is not a single hurdle that he hasn't skipped past. He showed all the creativity and talent that they never showed in the most important and critical issue, which has been an integral part of the Israeli agenda for the past 50 years, and that's the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The Israeli right, in the last decade at least, received a historical present from the Israeli public. It got the majority in order to try and move this process forward. But the only thing that it was able to do over the past 8 or 10 years is more terror, more intifada. And I know that Bennett was here and others, because the right has only two possible options. There's the one that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been promoting for many years, and that's eternal management of the conflict. That's it. But after 8 years of this medicine, it should have been clear even to Netanyahu that more than he manages the conflict, it's the conflict managing him. After all, there is no such thing as an eternal status quo. And Netanyahu, just like a driver who got his 4x4 into the mud, keeps spending more and more energy in order to stay in one place. And there's Bennett's proposal that he spoke about, and it doesn't matter how he calls it, how he tries to wrap it up. He's talking about the annexation of Syria, and he has to sell this to the Israelis. Now, I'm not talking about those Israelis who think that God is going to come down from heaven and fix everything for us. So he decided to tell us that there's 1 million Palestinians less than there really are in the territories in the West Bank. And if we annex Area C, then it's not so many people, and soon Egypt is going to take responsibility over Gaza. He's going to tell us that. We're still waiting, though. Why are we still waiting? Because right now, there are 3 struggles going on. 3 campaigns, actually, by the right. There's the regularization law, there's the Amona case, and there's the annexation of Ma'ale Adumim, and the proposal to transfer the American embassy to Jerusalem. We're talking about 3 unilateral moves, all of which have strategic international impact that the right is trying to sweep under the carpet, because when we say, but it has ramifications and implications, and every such thing could cause Israel to be even more of a pariah, even more boycotted and isolated around the world, they say, oh, no, it's going to be all right. These 3 things could have been achieved by signing an agreement with the Palestinians, but these 3 things are opposed by Netanyahu. Eventually, he is coerced into it. He was against the regularization, but voted for it. The annexation of Ma'ale Adumim was postponed. The vote on that was postponed. Let's see what happens in a few months. But these 3 issues that the right is dealing with reflect more than anything else an internal political struggle within the right on the heart of the settlers. Who's going to show themselves as more loyal to the settlers? There's no struggle over ideology here or strategy or an attempt to make Israel a safer place where it's a place where it's better to live. It's just astounding. We're talking about 8 years in power, and most of what the right has been trying to show all kinds of symbolic token moves or making the theft of Palestinian land legitimate. We know that Jerusalem is going to be the capital of Israel with or without the American embassy to the western part of the city. I'm not against that. I don't think that would be a wise move right now. The security forces also warn against the ramifications of such a move right now. I'm not against it. However, transferring the embassy is not going to make Israeli sovereignty over Jerusalem stronger. It might actually push other countries in the world recognize that Palestine with Jerusalem as its capital. I believe that Jerusalem has to be the capital of 2 states, as will be determined by an agreement, as well as the fate of the sacred sites, the holy sites. And that's what's going to happen. If Israel annexes Ma'ale Adumim, that is going to bury in a very undignified manner the two-state solution. Because if Ma'ale Adumim is annexed, then Gush Etzion will be next, and then Ariel as well, and that might cost us even the very precarious and sensitive cooperations that we have with Egypt. Both Assisi and King Abdallah announced that they were against this sort of annexation, and because the Palestinians agreed that under any signed agreement, the large settlement blocks will remain under an agreement. So what's the wisdom in making this sort of unilateral move that might cost us very dearly from a strategic international point of view? Now, Netanyahu understands this very well. He understands the international implications of the regularization law, of the annexation of Ma'ale Adumim, of the transfer of the embassy to Jerusalem. He also understands, you can't take that from him, how little the Israeli public stands to gain from these moves. However, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, both Netanyahu and Bennett suffer from the same kind of blindness, exactly the same kind of blindness. They both somehow suggest very simplistic solutions to a very complicated reality. They think that sea areas can be annexed without having any ramifications whatsoever. And somehow they talked themselves into believing that Trump is a historic opportunity, that we're all waiting just for Trump to come into office, and that it's an historic opportunity, and we can pretend that there aren't any other countries in the world other than the United States and Azerbaijan, and that they do it in such a way which says, okay, we're going to manage this conflict. Obviously, the conflict can be managed. You can also manage forest fire. But the thing is that the conflict feeds itself. There's always bad blood, there's always pain, there's always anger that feeds it all. There's always desperation to stoke the flames. If anyone thinks that you can rule over another nation for 50 years without any implications, wherever there are terror attacks and repaying blood, people are surprised. But why do you think we can continue doing that? Those who think we can continue doing that, to me, reflect some kind of being lost, having lost their way. And that's not the kind of Israel that I know. The Israel that I know has always known how to look reality in the eye. And wherever others despaired, Israel looked for a way to make things right, because we're a nation of people who know how to work hard and adapt and find solutions when no one else is able to find even a little chink. And Israeli doesn't look at this conflict, which has a price, carries a price tag of a few lives every month, and say, well, this is good enough. No. Instead of wondering where we want to be in 20 years' time, Netanyahu is leaving behind him mainly desperation and a shrug. You know how it is. But we have to start asking this question. What's going to happen in 20 years' time? Now, let me not be misunderstood. I'm naturally optimistic. That's my state of mind. But I'm not deluding myself. I also know that ending the conflict and ending the occupation after 50 years is going to have a price. After 50 years, the wounds of occupation are not going to heal overnight, and we're not going to have a pastoral relationship. But unless we want to, but do we want in 20 years' time to mark 69 years of occupation? Do we want our children and grandchildren to continue issuing permits for building, for trade, for everything else to the Palestinians? Is this what we want? Instead of a future, the Prime Minister is offering us an ongoing present of intifadas and military operations, and we haven't even spoken about Protective Edge and the Controller's report another year and another year of the same mistakes and the same discussions. To conclude, let me say, this is not the Israel that I know. And I believe that Israelis they really do deserve a much better future than this. Thank you very much.